The air hums with a low, mournful dirge, as though the planet itself exhales its final breath. The desert winds howl across the shattered plains of Cadia, carrying whispers, faint, distorted. Not of human origin, but something older, deeper, malignant. A single siren wails in the distance, its pitch wavering like a man choking on his last cry before it collapses into silence. The wind's relentless moan fills the void, a requiem for a world that has stood unbroken for millennia. I am Commissar, Elias Varn, my quill trembling in the flickering light of a dying candle, its wax pooling like blood on the cracked stone table. 60 years I have served the Emperor. 60 years I have heard the unyielding thunder of Cadia's guns, the heartbeat of the Imperium's defiance. But now, for the first time, they are silent. The guns of Cadia, the iron soul of our defense, have stopped. Why? What force could silence the unbreakable? What lurks beyond the shattered walls, where the sky burns red and the stars themselves seem to weep? These pages are my final duty, a record of Cadia's end, a warning to those who might find it. Listen, if you dare, to the tale of a bastion lost to darkness. The silence is not just an absence of sound, it is a presence. Heavy, suffocating, like a hand pressed against the chest. It began 3 days ago, when the Vox channels crackled with static, and then died. No orders, no reports, only the hiss of dead air. The men of the 8th Cadian Regiment, my charges, stood at their posts along the outer walls of Cadia. Their lasguns clutched tightly, their eyes scanning the horizon. They whispered of omens, a blood-red aurora that painted the night sky, the ground trembling beneath our feet, as though Cadia itself shuddered. I silenced their murmurs with a glare and a barked command, but even I could not deny the chill that crept into my bones. The wind carried voices, not from our ranks or the Vox, but from some deeper place, words I could not decipher, yet they stirred dread in my heart. A commissar trained to fear nothing but the Emperor's judgment. I walked the battlements that first night, my greatcoat snapping in the gale, my bolt pistol heavy at my side. The walls of Cadia, once a symbol of our unyielding resolve, were scarred and crumbling, pocked by centuries of war. Beyond them, the wastelands stretched into darkness, lit only by the crimson glow of the sky. The stars, once bright and constant, flickered as though struggling to shine through a veil of ash. I saw no enemy, no movement, yet the air was thick with malice. The men spoke in hushed tones of the Black Legion, of Abaddon's return, of the eye of terror swelling like a wound in the heavens. I dismissed their fears as cowardice, but the whispers grew louder, seeping into my thoughts. They spoke of betrayal, of a world's heart breaking, of a darkness that hungered for more than our lives. By dawn, the guns had fallen silent. The great macro cannons, the basilisks, the hydroflak, tanks all mute. I ordered the Enk to investigate, but they returned pale, muttering of machine spirits gone quiet, of mechanisms untouched yet refusing to fire. The men began to desert their posts, their discipline crumbling under the weight of that unnatural silence. I executed 3 for cowardice, their blood staining the frost-covered ground, but even my resolve wavered. The wind's whispers grew clearer, forming words I could almost understand. Cadia falls. The gate is broken. He comes. I told myself it was madness, a trick of the enemy, but the words burrowed into my mind like worms. On the second day, the sky burned. The crimson aurora flared brighter, casting the world in a hellish glow. The men claimed they saw shapes in the clouds' clawed hands, leering faces, eyes that blinked and vanished. I saw nothing but the red, yet I felt watched, judged, as though the heavens themselves bore witness to our doom. The Vox remained dead, and no reinforcements came. Cadia stood alone, its walls breached in a dozen places, its defenders dwindling. I rallied the men with speeches of duty, of the Emperor's light, but my words felt hollow. The whispers grew insistent, no longer content to haunt the edges of my mind. They spoke of a figure, a shadow clad in black, his eyes burning with the fire of 1,000 suns. They called him the Despoiler. That night, the stars wept. Streaks of light fell from the sky, not meteors, but something else, vessels perhaps, or fragments of a shattered moon. The ground shook with their impact, and the wind carried screams, not of men but of something inhuman. I climbed to the highest tower of Cadia, my breath clouding in the freezing air, and looked out over the wastelands. The horizon glowed, with fire, not the clean flame of Prometheum but a sickly, warp-tainted blaze. Shadows moved in the distance, vast and numberless, an army that stretched beyond sight. The Black Legion had come, but they were not alone. Demons walked among them, their forms twisting the air, their laughter mingling with the wind's moans. I returned to my quarters and began this journal, my quill scratching against the parchment. As the candle burned low, the men are breaking. I hear them weeping, praying, or worse, chanting words they should not know. The whispers are no longer just in the wind, they are in the walls, in the shadows, in my skull. They speak of Cadia's end, of a gate that held back the tide now shattered. They speak of Abaddon, his claw dripping with the blood of worlds, his voice promising annihilation. I have served the Emperor faithfully, but I am no fool. Cadia is lost. The guns are silent because there is nothing left to defend. The Imperium's bastion, the world that stood against the abyss, has fallen. Yet I write, because it is my duty. If these words survive, let them be a warning. The enemy is not just at the gate, they are within. The whispers are their heralds, sowing doubt and despair. I do not know what force silenced our guns, but I know it was not mortal. I do not know what lurks beyond the walls, but I feel its gaze, its hunger. The stars weep, the sky burns, and Cadia crumbles to dust. I am Commissar Elias Vaughn, and this is my final testament. The Emperor protects, but even his light cannot reach us now. The candle gutters out. The wind howls, and the whispers laugh. I hear boots on the stone outside. Not the disciplined march of Cadians, but something else. Something wrong. My bolt pistol is in my hand, but it feels heavy, useless. The door creaks open, and the shadows move. They are here. Asterisk in the flickering light of a dying candle, its wax pooling like the blood of a wounded world. I, Commissar Elias Vaughn, servant of the Emperor and keeper of Cadia's resolve, commit these words to parchment. My greatcoat, once a symbol of unyielding authority, hangs tattered from my shoulders, its edges frayed by the relentless winds that howled through the broken cases. My bolt pistol, heavy at my side, feels like an anchor pulling me toward an inevitable end. This journal, its pages yellowed and curling, is all that remains of a duty that has defined my 60 years on this scarred rock, a duty to Cadia, to the Imperium, to the Emperor who watches from his golden throne. These words are my confession, my record, my last offering to a world that may soon forget us. A testament to be found amidst the rubble by those who might yet seek the truth of what we endured. Cadia was more than a planet. She was the shield, the gatekeeper of the Eye of Terror, where the warp's malice spills into reality like poison from a festering wound. For 10,000 years, we held the line, our guns thundering, our faith iron against chaos, Xenos, and heretics. But now, the guns are silent, the sirens dead, and the wind carries whispers of doom that I cannot silence. No matter how fiercely I cling to my resolve. How did it come to this, that Cadia, the unyielding heart of the Imperium, could fall? What force could break a world forged in defiance? Are these whispers the warp's trickery, seeping through the eye, or Cadia's own voice, mourning her end? As I write, the air grows thick with dust, the ground trembles, and I feel the weight of those final hours, a tale of dread and defiance, meant to lull you into dreams as dark as the void. A story not of glory, but of truth. The silence came first, a void so profound it was as if the planet held its breath. For decades, the rhythm of Cadia's guns had been my heartbeat, the relentless boom of macro cannons, the chatter of lasguns, the roar of basilisks hurling defiance into the stars. They were the pulse of our world, a reminder that Cadia stood, that we were the bulwark against the horrors of the Eye. I remember the day it stopped. 3 nights ago, when the Vox channels crackled into static and then died. No orders came, no reports, only a hiss like the last gasp of a dying man. I stood on the battlements of Kaiserkraft, my post for the last decade, and watched the men of the 8th Cadian Regiment shift uneasily. Their eyes, usually steely with purpose, darted to the horizon, where the sky burned a sickly crimson, an aurora that pulsed like a wound in the heavens. They whispered of omens, of shadows moving in the wastelands, of voices carried on the wind. I silenced them with a glare and a barked command. My commissar's authority, a blade to cut through fear, but even I could not ignore the chill that settled in my bones. The wind was not just wind. It howled through the shattered walls of Kaiserkraft, carrying fragments of sound words, if they could be called that, in a tongue no human throat should form. They were not the voices of our men, nor the distorted chatter of the Vox, but something deeper, older, as if the planet itself spoke in its death throes. Cadia falls. The gate is broken. The words wormed into my mind, unbidden, and I shook my head to dispel them. gripping my bolt pistol as if its weight could anchor me to reality. I walked the battlements that night, my boots crunching on frost-covered stone, my breath clouding in the freezing air. The walls, scarred by centuries of war, stood as testament to our defiance. But they were crumbling now, breached in a dozen places, their strength sapped by an unseen force. Beyond them, the wastelands stretched into darkness, lit only by the red glow of the sky. The stars, once a map of the Emperor's dominion, flickered as though struggling to shine through a veil of ashdot. I am no stranger to war. I have faced orcs, their brutish roars echoing across the plains. Eldar, their blades singing with alien malice. And the foul spawn of the warp, their forms defying reason. But this was different. The silence was not just the absence of our guns, it was a presence, heavy, suffocating, like a hand pressing against my chest. The men felt it too. I saw it in their eyes, in the way their hands trembled on their lasguns, in the prayers they muttered when they thought I could not hear. I executed 2 for desertion that first night, their blood staining the ground, a warning to the others. But even as I pulled the trigger, I felt the whispers mocking me, their words twisting like smoke. He comes. I told myself. It was madness, a trick of the enemy, but the doubt lingered. A crack in the armor of my faith. By the second day, the sky was aflame. The crimson aurora flared brighter, casting the world in a hellish glow that made the shadows dance. The men claimed they saw shapes in the clouds, clawed hands reaching down, faces leering with too many eyes, forms that flickered and vanished. I saw nothing but the red, yet I felt watched, judged, as though the heavens bore witness to our doom. The Vox remained dead, and no reinforcements came. Kaiserkraft stood alone, its defenders dwindling as fear gnawed at their resolve. I rallied them with speeches of duty, of the Emperor's light, but my words felt hollow, drowned by the wind's relentless moan. The engineers reported that the guns, our mighty macro cannons, our hydroflak tanks, were untouched, yet their machine spirits refused to wake. It was as if Cadia herself had given up, her strength drained by some unseen wound. The whispers grew clearer, no longer content to haunt the edges of my mind. They spoke of a figure, a shadow clad in black, his eyes burning with the fire of 1,000 suns. They called him Abaddon, the despoiler, the herald of chaos. And they said he walked among us, his claw dripping with the blood of worlds. I dismissed it as warp's pond lies, but the men were breaking. Some wept openly, others chanted words they should not know, their voices joining the wind's chorus. I shot another for heresy, his body crumpling at my feet, but it did nothing to silence the whispers. They were in the walls now, in the shadows, in my skull. The gate is broken. The eye sees all. I clutched my Aquila pendant, praying for strength, but even the Emperor's symbol felt cold in my hand. On the third night, the stars wept. Streaks of light fell from the sky. Not meteors, but something else. Vessels, perhaps, or fragments of a shattered moon. The ground shook with their impact, and the wind carried screams. Not of men, but of something inhuman, a sound that clawed at the soul. I climbed to the highest tower of Kazakhraf, my greatcoat snapping in the gale, and looked out over the wastelands. The horizon glowed with fire, not the clean flame of Prometheum, but a sickly, warp-tainted blaze that pulsed like a heartbeat. Shadows moved in the distance, vast and numberless, an army that stretched beyond sight. The Black Legion had come, but they were not alone. Demons walked among them, their forms twisting the air, their laughter mingling with the wind's moans. I knew then that Cadia was lost, that the gate we had guarded for millennia was shattered, and that the Imperium's heart would bleed. I returned to my quarters, the candle burning low, its flame flickering as if afraid to shine. The air was thick with dust, the ground trembling beneath my feet. I began this journal, my quill scratching against the parchment, each word a defiance against the darkness closing in. The men are gone now, some fled, some dead, some worse. I hear them outside, their voices no longer human, chanting praises to gods I will not name. The whispers are louder, a cacophony that drowns out thought. Yet I write, because it is my duty. If these pages survive, let them be a warning. The enemy is within, not just at the gate. The whispers are their heralds, sowing despair, breaking even the strongest will. Cadia, the unyielding bastion, has fallen, not to force, but to something deeper, something that silenced our guns and stole our faith. I am Commissar Elias Vaughn, and this is my final testament. The candle gutters out, the wind howls, and the shadows move closer. My bolt pistol is in my hand, but it feels useless against what comes. The door creaks, and the whispers laugh. They are here, and I am ready. The Emperor protects, but his light cannot reach us now. Let this journal be found. Let it tell of Cadia's end, and let it haunt those who read it, with the truth of a world lost to darkness. Cadia was no mere world. She was the Imperium's soul. A fortress planet carved from defiance. Her surface, a tapestry of unyielding stone and steel. Her cases, vast city fortresses, bristled with guns. Their barrels trained on the heavens. Their spires piercing skies, lit by the baleful glow of the Eye of Terror. That swirling maelstrom of warp energy, where chaos festers like a wound in reality. Every Cadian was a soldier, born to fight, trained from childhood to hold the line against the horrors that spilled from that cursed rift, demons, heretics, and worse. For 10,000 years, we stood as the Emperor's shield, our creed, simple, unbreakable vow. Cadia stands. We broke Black Crusades, Abaddon's hordes shattering against our walls, like waves against a cliff. We drowned orc hordes in their own green blood, their war cries silenced by the disciplined volleys of our lasguns. We met tyrannid swarms with bayonet and bolter, their chittering masses ground to pulp beneath our tanks. Cadia was not just a world, it was a symbol, a beacon of defiance. The gatekeeper that held the Imperium's northern frontier against the abyss. Elias Varn was born in the shadow of Caesarcraft, one of Cadia's mightiest fortresses, its walls, scarred by centuries of war, its towers crowned with macro cannons that roared defiance at the stars. My earliest memories are not of peace, but of war's rhythm, the thunder of guns shaking the ground, the hymns of the faithful rising from regimental chapels, the sharp tang of Prometheum in the air. My father was a shock trooper of the 8th Cadian, his purple and khaki uniform a point of pride, his lasgun always at the ready. My mother, a medicae, worked tirelessly in the field hospitals, her hands stained with the blood of the wounded. When I was 9, a chaos raid struck our Khazara warband of night lords, their armor adorned with flayed skin, their screams like banshees in the night. My parents died holding the line, their bodies left broken in the rubble. Cadia taught me not to mourn, but to fight, to channel grief into duty. I became a white shield, a cadet trained in the arts of war, my small hands learning to wield a lasgun, my heart steeled by the Emperor's teachings. From white shield, I rose to trooper, then to commissar. My greatcoat, a symbol of authority, my bolt pistol, a promise of justice for those who faltered. I was forged in Cadia's fire, shaped by her unyielding resolve. My days as commissar were a rhythm of war, as constant as the tides. At dawn, I inspected the shock troopers of the 8th Cadian, their purple and khaki uniforms crisp, despite the dust that coated everything. Their lasguns gleamed in the pale light, each soldier standing ramrod straight under my gaze, knowing a single lapse could earn a bolt to the skull. Midday brought drills in the training yards, the crack of lost fire echoing across the scarred plains, the shouts of sergeants blending with the clank of tanks and the whine of Valkyrie engines overhead. I walked among the men, my voice cutting through the din, urging them to greater precision, greater discipline. The Emperor watches, I would say, and their eyes would harden, their movements sharpen. Nights were spent in my bunker, a Spartan chamber of ferrocrete, lit by a single luminary. There, I wrote reports by candlelight, detailing troop readiness, ammunition, stockpiles, and enemy movements. The Vox chatted constantly, a lifeline of updates from other captors, from orbiting ships, from the high command in Casa Primus. Above, it all loomed the Eye of Terror, a swirling vortex of purple and red that dominated the sky, its light casting long shadows across Cadia's surface. It was a reminder of why we fought, of the enemy that never slept. Cadia was a world of war, but it was also a world of faith. Every Casa had its chapel, its spires adorned with aquillas, its walls inscribed with litanies of devotion. The Ecclesiarchy's priests walked among us, their incense-heavy censers swinging, their voices raised in hymns that drowned out the distant rumble of artillery. We prayed daily, not out of fear but out of duty, our faith in the Emperor as vital as our weapons. I carried an Aquila pendant, a gift from my mother, its edges worn smooth by years of touch. It was my anchor, a reminder that even in the face of chaos, the Emperor's light endured. The men I led shared this faith, their prayers mingling with the clatter of their gear as they prepared for battle. We were not just soldiers, we were crusaders, tasked with holding the line against the galaxy's darkest threats. Yet, in the weeks before the silence, something changed. The men began to speak of strange things, their voices low, their eyes darting as if expecting rebuke. They spoke of dreams vivid, shared nightmares of a sky burning red. of Cadia's walls crumbling to dust, of prayers unanswered by the emperors. Light, they called it the shadow in the sky, a phrase that spread like a virus through the ranks. At first dismissed it as fatigue, the strain of endless war wearing down even Cadian discipline. I ordered extra drills, harsher punishments, anything to stamp out the whispers. But the unease grew, a subtle shift like the first tremors before an earthquake. The guns, always reliable, began to stutter, their barrages uneven, their machine spirits reluctant. The sirens, which wailed at the approach of enemy ships, sounded unevenly, their pitches wavering like a man choking on his last breath. Even the Vox, our lifeline, crackled with static, its messages garbled, as if something interfered from beyond. I felt it too, though I dared not admit it. A chill settled in my bones, no matter how tightly I wrapped my trench coat. At night, alone in my bunker, I would stare at the Eye of Terror, its light pulsing like a heartbeat. I told myself it was nothing, that Cadia had faced worse black crusades, Xenos, invasions, warp storms that tore ships from the void. But the chill persisted, a nagging doubt that gnawed at my faith. Then came the whispers. They were not from the Vox, nor from the men, but from within, a soft, insidious murmur that grew louder with each passing day. Cadia falls. The gate is broken. The words were not mine, yet they filled my mind, twisting like smoke. I gripped my Aquila pendant, reciting litanies to drown them out, but they persisted, hinting at a doom I could not name. Were these the warps, lies, chaos seeping through the eye to break our resolve? Or was it Cadia herself, her ancient soul warning us of an end we could not escape? The men's dreams grew darker, their reports more desperate. They spoke of shadows moving in the wastelands beyond Kaiserkraft, of figures that flickered and vanished. They claimed the ground trembled, not with artillery but with something deeper, as if Cadia shuddered in fear. I executed 3 for spreading panic, their blood staining the frost-covered ground, but it did nothing to quell the unease. The Engensers reported anomalies. Machine spirits gone quiet. Auspex readings erratic, as if the planet's very systems rebelled. I walked the battlements each night, my greatcoat snapping in the wind, my bolt pistol heavy at my side. The walls of Kaiserkraft, once a symbol of our strength, were scarred and crumbling, their breaches unpatched due to dwindling supplies. Beyond them, the wastelands stretched into darkness, lit only by the crimson glow of the sky. The stars flickered, their light dimmed by a veil of ash, and the Eye of Terror seemed to grow, its edges bleeding into the heavens. I began to question everything. Was the shadow in the sky a trick of the warp, a psychic assault meant to break us before the enemy struck? Or was it real, a harbinger of something worse than any Black Crusade? The whispers grew clearer, speaking of a figure clad in black, his eyes burning with the fire of 1,000 suns. They called him the Abaddon, the architect of our doom. I dismissed it as heresy, but the doubt lingered, a crack in my resolve. I prayed harder, my knees bruising against the ferrocrete floor of my bunker's small shrine. But the Emperor's light felt distant, as if obscured by the ice malice. The final night before the silence, I stood on Kaiserkraft's highest tower, the wind howling like a choir of the damned. The sky burned red, an aurora that pulsed with unnatural life. The men below were breaking, some wept. Others chanted words they should not know, their voices joining the wind's moans. I clutched my journal, its pages already filled with reports of the growing unrest. I wrote of the whispers, of the shadow in the sky, of a question that haunted me. What force could break Cadia, the unyielding heart of the Imperium? As the candle in my bunker guttered, I felt the weight of those final hours, a tale of dread and defiance that would soon be my last. Duty to record, Cadia had stood for millennia. But now, as the guns fell silent and the whispers laughed, I feared her end was near. The guns faltered, their thunder fading like the dying heartbeat of a world that had never known silence. I, Commissar Elias Farn, walked the ramparts of Kaiserkraft, my boots crunching on frost-dusted stone, past silent emplacements where gun crews stood frozen, their eyes fixed on a horizon too dark to still. The sky hung heavy, as if the stars had fled, leaving only a crimson smear where the Eye of Terror pulsed like a wound. The air was thick with dust and the acrid tang of molten stone, and the wind howled through the breaches in our walls, carrying whispers that clawed at the edges of my mind. The Hive fleet had come, not with chittering hordes or claw-waving swarms, but with fire bioplasma raining from orbit in relentless sheets, melting steel and stone, reducing centuries-old fortifications to slag. It was a bombardment unlike any we had faced, offering no enemy to shoot, no charge to meet, only a grinding pressure that choked hope from our hearts. The men called it the shadow in the sky, their voices low, their eyes filled with a doubt I could not quell. No matter how fiercely I gripped my bolt pistol or barked orders, I rallied them. Striding along the battlements, my greatcoat snapping, in the gale, my voice cutting through the unnatural silence. Cadia stands. I roared, the words a reflex honed by decades of service, but they tasted hollow ash on my tongue, as the guns remained mute, and the sirens those piercing wails that had heralded every threat for millennia broke, their cries twisting into screeches before dying altogether. Below, tech priests chanted litanies over dead cogitators, their mechadendrites probing lifeless consoles, their binharic prayers unanswered. The machine spirits were silent, as if they, too, had abandoned us. The men looked to me, their commissar, for strength, for certainty, but I had none to give. My hands trembled beneath my gloves, and my Aquila pendant felt cold against my chest. A weight rather than a comfort. A veteran, his face scarred from a dozen campaigns, muttered, "The whispers know my name." His eyes were wide, unfocused, as if he saw something beyond the horizon. I should have shot him for heresy, for spreading fear among the ranks. My bolt pistol was in my hand, its weight familiar, but I stayed my trigger finger. Instead, I ordered him to the Medicaid tent, my voice steady despite the tremor in my soul. To spare him was weakness, a betrayal of my duty, yet I could not deny the truth in his words. The whispers were not just in the wind, they were in us. A chorus of despair rising from the earth itself, speaking of a doom we could not escape. Cadia falls. The gate is broken. The words burrowed into my mind, unbidden, and I clenched my jaw, forcing them down. I remembered a day at Cadia years ago, when I was a young trooper, not yet burdened by the greatcoat of a commissar. We had broken a Black Legion raid, our guns thundering, our bayonets red with traitor blood. The men sang hymns as we burned the heretics' corpses, their voices rising above the crackle of flames, their faith untested. That memory mocked me. Now, a cruel reminder of a time when Cadia's strength seemed eternal, when the Emperor's light burned bright. Now, amidst silent guns and broken sirens, that faith felt like a dream, fading with each impact of the Hive fleet's bombardment. The bioplasma fell without cease, each strike shaking the earth, sending tremors through Kazacraft's foundations. Fortifications crumbled, their stones swept away by the wind, reduced to dust that stung my eyes and coated my throat. The spires, once proud, toppled like felled giants, their ruins glowing with residual heat. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony that drowned out thought. I retreated to my bunker, a ferrocrete chamber half collapsed under the bombardment, and opened my journal. The candle flickered, its flame nearly spent, casting shadows that danced like demons. My quill scratched against the parchment, smudged with trembling ink. If Cadia falls, what remains? The question haunted me, a wound I could not close. Wrote of the men breaking, their faces etched with fear I had never seen in Cadian's sergeant. A man who had faced orcs without flinching, wept openly, his hands clutching a rosary. A white shield barely old enough to hold a lasgun muttered, "It sees us." His eyes darting to the ceiling, as if the Hive fleet's mind peered through the stone. I knelt beside them, my voice low, whispering, "The Emperor protects." It was a lie, the only comfort I had left, and it tasted bitter. The whispers mocked me, revealing themselves as our own fear, amplified by the warp's hunger. The eye of terror drank our despair, singing it back in a requiem for our fall. The bombardment intensified, each impact a hammer blow against Cadia's anvil. Kazacraft's walls fell, their breaches widening until entire sections collapsed, exposing the inner courtyards to the burning sky. The bioplasma melted defenses, turning bunkers into molten pools, and spores choked the air, a sickly green haze that burned the lungs. I saw a gun crew dissolve, their screams fading into the wind as the plasma consumed them, their lasguns clattering to the ground. The sight broke something in me, a crack in the iron resolve I had worn like armor. I ordered a retreater, word like poison on Cadia, a world where we had never yielded ground. The men obeyed, their faces blank, their discipline fraying as they stumbled through the rubble, lasguns slung uselessly over their shoulders. We fell back to the inner Kaiser, a maze of tunnels and bunkers carved deep into the rock. The air was stifling, heavy with the stench of sweat and fear. I gathered the remnants of the 8th Cadian, perhaps 200 souls, their uniforms torn, their eyes hollow. I tried to rally them, to speak of duty, of the Emperor's light, but my words faltered. The whispers were everywhere now, a tide of despair that seeped through the walls, through our minds. He sees you. The Hive knows. I realized then that the Hive fleet was not just a physical fit, was a psychic predator. Its mind vast and alien, probing our weaknesses, feeding on our doubt. The Eye of Terror amplified its power, turning our own fears against us. A weapon, more devastating than any bio-plasma dot in the bunker. I wrote feverishly. My journal, a lifeline to sanity. I recorded the men's breaking, the walls collapse, the sky's red malice. I wrote of the veteran, who knew my name, of the White Shield's terror, of my own failure to shoot them. I wrote of Kaiser Sonnen, of a time when victory was certain, when Cadia's guns sang, and the Emperor's light was near. Now, that light was gone, swallowed by the shadow in the sky. The candle guttered, its wax pooling like blood, and I felt the ground shake with each orbital strike. The tunnels groaned, dust raining from the ceiling, and I knew the inner Kaiser would not hold. The final hours were a blur of despair. The bioplasma breached the tunnels, its heat searing through ferrocrete, its light blinding. Men screamed as spores filled the air, their bodies convulsing as the Hive fleet's biology consumed them. I fired my bolt pistol until the magazine ran dry, each shot a futile defiance against an enemy that could not be fought. The whispers drowned out everything, a chorus of our own voices, twisted by the warp. Cadia is nothing. You are nothing. I saw the sergeant fall, his rosary clutched in a charred hand. The White Shield ran, only to be consumed by a wave of plasma. I stood alone, my greatcoat smoldering, my journal clutched to my chest. I stumbled to a corner of the bunker, the last intact chamber, and knelt beside the dying candle. The whispers were deafening, but I wrote, my quill trembling, ink smudging with sweat and blood. I wrote of Cadia's fall, of Kazakrav's ruin, of a world that had stood for millennia now crumbling to dust. I wrote of the Hive fleet, its fire and spores, its psychic hunger that broke us without a single claw raised. I wrote of the Eye of Terror, its malice feeding the whispers, turning our fear into a weapon. I wrote of my failure, my weakness, my lie that the Emperor protected us. The candle went out, plunging me into darkness, and the whispers laughed. A sound like breaking glass. The bunker shook, the ceiling cracking, and I heard the wind, now a scream, carrying the Hive fleet's triumph. My bolt pistol was empty, my Aquila pendant lost in the rubble. I closed my journal, its pages complete, a record of Cadia's end. I pressed it against the wall, hoping it might survive, a warning for those who might find it. The whispers were silent now, their work done, and I felt only the weight of defeat. Kazakrav was gone, its spires dust, its guns silent. Cadia, the Imperium's soul, had fallen, not to a glorious battle but to a relentless, alien malice that offered no chance for defiance. I stood, my legs unsteady, and faced the collapsing tunnel. The bioplasma's light filled the air, and I walked toward it, my journal left behind. There were no battles, no last stands, only defeat, a truth as bitter as the spores in my lungs. The Emperor's light was gone, and I was alone, a commissar who had failed his world. The whispers had been right. Cadia was nothing, and I was nothing. Yet I walked, because it was all I knew, into the fire that consumed the last of Kazarkraf, into the end of Cadia's story. I am Elias Vaughn, and I am failing. My 60 years as Cadia's fist, her voice, her will, are now reduced to the trembling hands of an old man in a tattered greatcoat, its hem fraying like the faith I have clung to for decades. The whispers know my doubts, my fears, my sins, burrowing into my mind like worms, speaking truths I cannot bear. This journal, its pages smudged with blood and ash, is my confession, my last grasp at duty, a tether to what little remains of the man I was. A commissar is iron, unyielding. The Emperor's wrath made flesh, a figure to inspire fear and devotion in equal measure. I was that once, striding among the ranks of the 8th Cadian, my bolt pistol a symbol of justice, my greatcoat a banner of authority. But now, in the shadow of Kazakrav's ruins, with the sky bleeding red and the guns silent, I am just Elias, haunted by memories, broken by whispers, clinging to a purpose that slips through my fingers like dust. I remember my first execution, decades ago, when my greatcoat was still stiff with newness and my heart burned with zeal. A trooper, barely older than a White Shield, fled a Tyranid charge, his laskin abandoned in the mud. I found him cowering behind a wrecked chimera, his eyes wide with terror. My bolt pistol roared, its report echoing across the battlefield, and the men cheered, their faith in Cadia's discipline reaffirmed. I felt nothing then, only the cold certainty of duty. My role as Commissar clear, to root out weakness, to forge the men into steel. But now, in the silence of Cadia, I see that trooper's face in every man, every white shield, every whispered prayer. I see my son Joran lost to a black crusade 20 years ago, his body unrecovered. His name a wound I buried, as Cadia demands. The whispers speak his name now, pulling it from the depths of my grief, and I cannot silence them. No matter how tightly I grip my Aquila pendant, or recite the Emperor's litanies. Joran was 16 when he died, a white shield with my eyes and his mother's stubbornness. I see him still, standing in the training yards of Cadia, his uniform crisp, his lasgun held with a boy's pride. I recall a day there, years before his death, when I stood atop a wrecked lemon rust tank, its hull scorched by plasma fire. The Black Legion had struck, their warband cutting through our outer defenses, and the men wavered, their lines buckling under the weight of heretic bullets. I climbed the tank, my greatcoat billowing, and raised my voice. For Cadia, for the Emperor. The words carried, igniting the men's spirits, their cheers shaking the earth as they charged. Bayonets fixed, driving the traitors back. Joran was there, among the white shields, looking up at me with a pride that warmed me more than any medal. A year later, he was gone, cut down in a raid on Khazar Sonin, his body lost to the flames. I buried my grief, as Cadia taught me, locking it away with my duty, but the whispers have found it. Their mocking laughter, tearing open that old wound. In these final hours. As Cadia crumbles under the High Fleet's bioplasma, I walked the ruins, my boots crunching on shattered ceramite, the air thick with spores and the stench of burning flesh. The guns are silent, their barrels cold, their crews dissolved into ash by the relentless bombardment. The sirens are dead, their wails replaced by the wind's howl, carrying whispers that know my heart. Elias, you failed him. You failed them. All. I found a trooper, no older than Joran had been, crouched in the shadow of a collapsed wall, clutching a tattered Aquila torn from a banner. His lips moved in prayer. Emperor, save us. His eyes were wide, like Joran's in his final moments, and I should have disciplined him for abandoning his post. A commissar does not tolerate weakness. But my bolt pistol stayed holstered, my hand trembling as I knelt beside him, my glove stained with blood and ash. He hears you, I said, my voice soft, a mercy that broke me. The whispers laughed, mocking my shame, my failure to be the iron they needed. I am not the man I was. The Elias Vaughn who stood on that tank at Cadia, who executed cowards without hesitation, is gone, eroded by 60 years of war, by the loss of my son, by the whispers that know my sins. I have killed men for lesser doubts than those that plague me now, yet I cannot pull the trigger on myself. Duty holds me, a fraying thread, compelling me to write, to record, to bear witness to Cadia's end. The High Fleet's bombardment is relentless, each strike a hammer blow that shakes the earth, reducing Cadia spires to rubble, its walls to molten slag. There are no hordes to fight, no claws to meet with bayonets, only fire from the sky and spores that choke the lungs. The men break around me, their discipline crumbling like the fortifications. A sergeant, a veteran of a dozen campaigns, weeps openly, his lasgun forgotten. A white shield mutters of a presence that sees us, his words echoing the whispers in my mind. I should shoot them, restore order, but I cannot. I see Joran in their faces, and the whispers sing of my failure. I retreated to the last rampart, a crumbling ledge overlooking the burning wastelands. The sky is a bleeding wound, the eye of terror pulsing with malice, its light amplifying the Hive Fleet's psychic hunger. The whispers are a chorus now, a tide of despair that threatens to drown me. Surrender, Elias. You are nothing. I clutch my journal to my chest, its pages heavy with the weight of my confession. I write of Joran, of the trooper I spared, of the men I failed to save. I write of Cadia, of a time when my voice could rally thousands, when Cadia's guns thundered and the Emperor's light was near. Now, that light is gone, swallowed by the shadow in the sky, and I am alone, a commissar who cannot inspire, who cannot kill the fear in his own heart. But then, amidst the rubble, I saw a lasgun, abandoned in the dust, its power cell glowing faintly. Cadian's weapon, never surrendered. It called to me, a spark of defiance in the dark. I dropped my journal and picked it up, my hand steady for the first time in days. The whispers surged, urging surrender, but I raised the lasgun to the sky, its barrel pointed at the crimson void. I fired one shot, a crack of light that pierced the darkness, silencing the whispers for a moment. In that instant, I was Elias Varnigan, Commissar, Cadian, servant of the Emperor. The shot did nothing to the Hive fleet, its bioplasma still reigning, its spores still choking the air. But it was mine, a defiance that reminded me who I was. I returned to my journal, the candle in my bunker nearly spent, its flame flickering, like my faith. The whispers returned, softer now, but I wrote through them, my quill steady. I wrote of the lasgun, of the trooper I spared, of Joran's pride at Khazad-Earth. I wrote of my failure, my doubt, my sin of mercy, in a world that demands iron. But I wrote also of defiance, of a single shot fired into the dark, Acadian's answer to despair. The bombardment grows closer, the bunker shaking, dust raining from the ceiling. The whispers speak of surrender, but I will not listen. I am Elias Vaughn, and though I am failing, I am not yet broken. My greatcoat is tattered, my faith frayed, but I am still a commissar, still a king. This journal is my last duty, a record of a man who faltered but did not fall, who fired one shot for Cadia, for the Emperor, for the son I could not save. The candle gutters out, plunging me into darkness. The whispers laugh, but they are distant, now, drowned by the memory of that lasgun's crack. The bunker trembles, the bioplasma's heat seeping through the walls. I clutch my journal, its pages complete, and press it against the ferrocrete, hoping it will survive. I stand, the lasgun in my hands, and face the collapsing tunnel. The Hive fleet's fire comes, and I am ready not as a hero, but as a Cadian, my duty unbroken, my defiance alive in that single shot. The Emperor protects, and though his light is dim, I carry it still, into the dark. Into the end, Cadia is gone, her guns silent, her sirens dead, her Khazars reduced to dust under a sky that burns with the malice of the Eye of Terror. I, Elias Varn, Commissar of the 8th Cadian, write these final words in a bunker, its ferrocrete walls cracked and groaning, the air thick with the sickly green spores of the Hive fleet. My candle is a stub, its flame flickering like the last embers of Cadia's light, yet I am not afraid. I have seen the truth of our fall, and though my greatcoat is tattered, my hands tremble, and my faith frays. I write to bear witness, to confess, to leave a testament for those who might find it amidst the rubble. Cadia, the Imperium's soul, the unyielding shield against the warp's horrors, has fallen, but her spirit endures in the lasgun I fired, in the trooper's Aquila, in the prayers that never stopped. This journal is my final duty, a record of a world's end, and a spark of hope for what may rise from her ashes. The silence came first, a void that swallowed the heartbeat of Cadia's guns. For millennia, their thunder was our anthem, the macro of Khazar craft roaring defiance, the basilisks shaking the earth, the lasguns of our shock troopers, a chorus of discipline. I walked the ramparts that final day, my boots crunching on ceramite shards, past emplacements where crews stared at a horizon too dark, too still. The sky was heavy, the stars fled, replaced by a crimson aurora that pulsed like a wound. The Hive fleet did not come with chittering hordes or slashing claws, as we had faced before. It came with annihilation, not war bioplasma raining from orbit in relentless sheets, melting stone and steel, turning Khazars into molten slag. Spores choked the air, a green haze that burned the lungs and dimmed the eyes. There was no enemy to face, no line to hold, only a grinding pressure that crushed hope as surely as it crushed our defenses. The men called it the shadow in the sky, their voices low, their eyes haunted. I rallied them, my voice sharp with the authority of a commissar. Cadia stands, but the words were hollow, drowned by the silence of the guns and the broken wails of sirens that screeched and died. Tech priests chanted over dead cogitators, their mechadendrites probing lifeless consoles, but the machine spirits were gone, as if Cadia herself had given up. The whispers began then, not from the vox or the wind, but from within a chorus of despair that knew our names, our fears, our sins. Cadia falls, the gate is broken. I told myself it was the warp's trickery, the Eye of Terror's malice seeping through to break our resolve, but I knew the truth. The whispers were our own, our doubts and grief amplified by the warp's hunger, the Eye drinking our pain and singing it back. A requiem for a world that had stood for 10,000 years. I remembered a day at Kazakhstan decades ago, when we broke a Black Legion raid. Our guns thundered, our bayonets ran red, and the men sang hymns as we burned the heretics' corpses. My son, Joran, a white shield, stood among them, his eyes bright with pride. He died a year later, lost to a black crusade, his body unrecovered, his loss a wound I buried under duty. But the Whispers found it, speaking his name, mocking my grief. In these final hours, I walked the ruins of Kaiserkraft, my greatcoat heavy with ash, and found a trooper, no older than Joran, clutching a tattered Aquila. He prayed, "Emperor, save us." And I should have shot him for abandoning his post. Instead, I knelt, my gloves stained with blood, and whispered, "He hears you." The Whispers laughed at my mercy. But in that moment, I saw Joran's face, and I could not pull the trigger. The bombardment grew heavier, each impact shaking the earth, crumbling fortifications, toppling spires. The bioplasma melted bunkers into glowing pools, and the spores consumed men, their screams fading into the wind. I ordered a retreat, a word like poison, on Cadia leading the remnants of the 8th Cadian into the inner tunnels. There, in a bunker lit by a dying candle, I wrote, my quill trembling, ink smudging with sweat and blood. I wrote of the men breaking, of a sergeant weeping, of a white shield muttering, "It sees us." I wrote of my own failure, my mercy, a betrayal of the iron. A Commissar must be. The whispers grew louder, a tide of despair that drowned thought, urging surrender. "You are nothing, Cadia is nothing." But amidst the rubble, I found a lasgun, its power cell glowing. Acadian's weapon never surrendered. I fired it into the sky. One shot, a crack of defiance that silenced the whispers for a moment. In that act, I was Elias Varnigan, Cadian, servant of the Emperor. The truth of Cadia's fall is not in the High Fleet's might. Though it was vast, a force too great for even our iron will, the bioplasma was annihilation, a fire that melted our defenses, a storm that offered no battle, only destruction. The spores were a plague, choking our air, dissolving our men into ash. But the true weapon was the whispers. Our own despair turned against us, amplified by the warp's hunger. The eye of terror, that gaping wound in the heavens, drank our fear, our grief, our doubt, and fed it back. A psychic assault that broke us where bolters and claws could not. I saw it in the men's eyes, in the way they clutched their rosaries, or muttered heresies they should not know. I felt it in my own heart, the whispers speaking of Joran, of my failures, of a world that could not stand. Yet Cadia's spirit endures. It lives in the lasgun I fired, its single shot a spark in the dark. It lives in the trooper's Aquila, clutched in trembling hands, a symbol of faith unbroken. It lives in the prayers that never stopped, even as the walls fell and the sky burned. I kneel now, my greatcoat pooling around me, the bunker shaking with the High Fleet's final blows. The candle is nearly gone, its flame a faint glow against the darkness. I pray, my voice steady despite the spores in my lungs. "Emperor, forgive us. Guide those who follow." My journal is done, its pages a testament to Cadia's stand, left for those who might find it amidst the ashes. I press it against the ferrocrete hoping it will survive, a record of a world that fought until its last breath. The Imperium will reel from Cadia's fall. The eye of terror, wider now, will spill horrors untold, its demons and traitors flooding through the gate. We could not hold terror made dim, its spires tarnished, its light faltering under the weight of this loss. But Cadians will fight on. I see them in my mind's eye, scattered across the stars. Their purple and khaki uniforms torn, but their eyes blazing with defiance. They will carry Cadia's fire, a spark in the dark, a beacon for the Emperor's dream. They will fight in the ruins, in the void, on worlds yet unnamed. Because Cadia is not just a planet, it is a creed, a vow, a flame that cannot be extinguished. In these final moments, as the bunker collapses and the bioplasma's heat seeps through the walls, I am not afraid. The whispers are silent now, their work done, but they could not break me. I am Elias Varn, Commissar, Cadian servant of the Emperor. I have seen the truth of our fall not in defeat, but in the defiance that outlives it. Cadia stood, even as she fell, her gun silent but her spirit unyielding. I closed my eyes, the lasgun at my side, its power cell spent but its weight a comfort. The Emperor's light is dim, but I carry it still, a spark in my heart. A fire that will burn in those who come after. And though Cadia fell that day, you won't believe what rose from her ashes. Across the Imperium, on worlds besieged and in fleets battered by the warp's tides, Cadians will rise. They will carry our creed, our fire, our defiance. They will fight, not for a planet lost, but for what it stood for. the Emperor's dream, the Imperium's hope. My journal is my last act, a spark flung into the dark, a message for those who will carry on. The bunker shakes, the spores choke my breath, and the candle gutters out. I stand, my greatcoat heavy, my duty complete. The Hive fleet comes, but I am ready, a Cadian to the end. My heart alight with the fire of a world that will never truly die. You've walked Cadia's ruins with me, heard her whispers, felt the weight of her fall, and I, Elias Vaughn, or perhaps just a ghost clinging to the last threads of duty. Thank you for bearing witness to a world's end. My journal, stained with blood and ash, its pages heavy with the truth of Cadia's final hours, is now yours to carry through the grimdark universe. A testament to a planet that stood as the Imperium's shield for 10,000 years. Did these words reach the spires of Terra, a flickering beacon of our defiance, or do they lie buried beneath the rubble of Cadia, lost to the howling winds that sweep Cadia's corpse? I am but a shadow now, my greatcoat tattered, my bolt pistol silent, yet I linger in these pages, urging you to honor the fallen, to keep Cadia's story alive in your words. The grimdark universe is vast, its tales of sacrifice and sorrow endless, and I call you to share your thoughts, to weave your voice into the requiem of a world lost, and to join me in the fight to ensure the Emperor's dream endures. Another chapter awaits, a story of war, loss, or defiance in his name, and I ask you to subscribe to this saga, to stand ready for the whispers of worlds yet to fall. If sleep calls, let Cadia's tale guide you into dreams as dark as the void, where the Emperor's light battles the shadows that hunger for our souls. Cadia was no mere world, she was the Imperium's soul. A fortress planet forged in defiance, her cases bristling with guns, her spires piercing a sky lit by the eye of Terra's baleful glow. For millennia, we held the line, our guns thundering against black crusades, orc hordes, and tyrannid swarms. Every Cadian was a soldier, born to fight, trained from childhood to embody our creed. Cadia stands. I was one of them, Elias Vaughn, born in the shadow of Cadia, my life shaped by the rhythm of war dawn inspections, midday drills, nights spent writing reports as the Vox chattered and the eye loomed above. My parents fell to a chaos raid when I was 9, my son Joran to a black crusade at 16, and I buried my grief as Cadia demanded. Rising from White Shield to Commissar, my greatcoat, a symbol of duty, my bolt pistol, a promise of justice. But, in the end, Cadia fell, not to bolters or claws, but to the Hive fleet's annihilation bioplasma that melted our defenses. Spores that choked our air, and whispers that were our own despair, amplified by the warp's hunger. The fall began, with silence, the guns faltering, their thunder fading like a dying heartbeat. I walked the ramparts of Cadia, past silent emplacements, the crew staring at a horizon too still, the sky heavy with a burning red aurora. The Hive fleet's bombardment was no war, it was obliteration, offering no enemy to face, only fire and plague. The sirens broke, their wails turning to screeches, and the tech priest's chants over dead cogitators went unanswered. The men, my 8th Cadian, called it the shadow in the sky, their eyes filled with doubt I could not quell. I rallied them. Cadia stands. But the words were ash, and the whispers grew, speaking my sins, my son's name, my failures. They were not just the warp's trickery, but our own hearts, turned against us by the eye of Terra's malice, a psychic tide that broke us where steel could not dot. In those final hours, I saw the truth. The Hive fleet's bioplasma melted Cadia's walls. Its spores dissolved men into ash, but the whispers were the true weapon, feeding on our fear, our grief, our doubt. I found a trooper, no older than Joran, clutching a tattered Aquila, praying, "Emperor, save us." I knelt beside him, whispering, "He hears you," a mercy that shamed me, the whispers laughing at my weakness. I ordered a retreat, a word like poison, and led the remnants into tunnels that shook with each impact. In a bunker, my candle dying, I wrote of the men breaking, of a sergeant weeping, a White Shield muttering, "It seizes." I wrote of my own failure, my faith fraying. But amidst the rubble, I found a lasgun, its power cell glowing. I fired it into the sky. One shot, a spark of defiance that silenced the whispers for a moment, reminding me who I was, Elias Vaughn, Commissar, Cadian, servant of the Emperor. Cadia is gone now, her cases dust, her guns silent, her sirens dead. I wrote my final words in that bunker, the air thick with spores, the walls cracking, my candle a stub. I was not afraid, for I saw the truth. Cadia fell because the Hive fleet was annihilation, a force too vast for even our iron will, and the whispers were our despair, the eye of terror drinking our pain and singing it back. But Cadia's spirit endures. It lives in that last gun's shot, in the trooper's Aquila, in the prayers that never stopped. I knelt, my greatcoat pulling, and prayed, Emperor, forgive us. Guide those who follow, leaving my journal for those who might find it, a testament that Cadia stood, even as she fell. You who have read these pages, have walked with me through the ruins, heard the whispers, felt the weight of loss. I ask you now, what becomes of my journal? Does it reach the Imperium, carried by some survivor to Terra's spires, a spark to kindle defiance in a darkening galaxy? Or does it lie buried, lost to the winds that scour Cadia's corpse, its words unread, its truth forgotten? Share your thoughts below, honor the fallen with me. Let your words be a hymn for those who fought and died. Tell me, did Cadia's story stir your heart, ignite your resolve, or chill your soul with the grimdark truth of our fall? Cadia was more than a planet. She was a creed, a fire that burned in every Cadian's heart, and though her stones are dust, that fire lives on in those who carry her name. The Imperium will stagger without Cadia, the gate to the eye of terror, broken, its horrors spilling forth. Demons will walk worlds, traitors will march under Abaddon's banner, and terror's light made dim, its spires tarnished by the shadow of our loss. Yet I see Cadians rising, their purple and khaki uniforms, torn but their eyes blazing, fighting on distant worlds, in void-torn fleets, their lasguns a chorus of defiance. They carry Cadia's spark, a beacon for the Emperor's dream, a vow that will not die. My journal is one such spark, flung into the dark, a message for those who will fight on. I ask you to add your voice to this saga, to speak of Cadia, to keep her memory alive. What does her fall mean to you? Is it a warning, a call to arms, or a shadow that haunts your dreams? The grimdark universe holds more tales, each a thread in the tapestry of sacrifice and sorrow. I, or my ghost, will return, with another chapter, a story of war, of loss, of defiance in the Emperor's name. Perhaps it will be of a lone space marine, holding a pass against a tide of orcs, his bolter singing until the end. Perhaps it will be of a hive city consumed by plague, its people praying as the shadows close in. Or perhaps it will be of a navigator, lost in the warp, her soul battling whispers, not unlike those that broke Cadia. Subscribe to this journey. Join the fight. Stand ready to hear the whispers of worlds yet to fall. Your presence, your words, are a bulwark against the dark, a testament that the Emperor's light endures, even in the void. If sleep calls, let Cadia's tale guide you into dreams as dark as the void, where the Emperor's light battles the shadows. See Craft's ruins, hear the whispers, feel the weight of my lasgun's final shot. Dream of the trooper's Aquila, of prayers unanswered yet unbroken, of a world that fell but left a fire that burned still. In those dreams, you may find Cadia's truth not in her fall, but in what rose from her ashes. Cadians fight on, their creed unyielding, their defiance a spark that lights the stars. My journal is yours now, a weight to carry, a duty to uphold. Speak of Cadia, honor her dead, and let her story live in your words. A flame against the grim night. I am Elias Vaughn, or perhaps just a ghost. My candle spent, my bunker collapsed, my body dust. But my words endure, carried by you, the reader, the witness, the heir to Cadia's fire. The hive fleet's bioplasma consumed us, the whispers broke us, but they could not extinguish us. I see you, across the stars, reading these pages, your heart stirred by our defiance, your soul chilled by our loss. Share your thoughts, let them be a prayer for the fallen, a vow for the living. The grimdark universe waits, its stories endless, its shadows deep. Will you walk with me again, to hear the next tale, to face the next fall? Subscribe, stand ready, and let Cadia's spark burn in you. A light that defies the dark, a creed that echoes beyond the grave. Cadia stands,